Hello, Munro Live podcast viewers. Today we got a special guest, James Bell. He's Kia's head of communications, corporate communications, and public relations. So welcome, James. Glad to have you today.
You call everybody a special guest. Come on, let's be. No, it's a pleasure. I'm very familiar with what you guys are doing there, and it's an honor to be a part of it.
And I probably should take a second and introduce myself because I don't often get on the podcast. I'm Mike Oakes. I'm Munro's VP for Business Development. I originally left General Motors 30 years ago to come and work with Sandy when it was a 5 to 6 person company. So very familiar with what Munro does for our customers. And for those new to the podcast, Munro is basically our typical customer needs help getting their product to be more profitable, and they need help scaling it up, right? They want to make a lot more of their product. So that's our typical customer, and being based in Metro Detroit, we tend to have a lot of automotive customers, but we also have a lot of customers in industrial space, technology, or electronics, medical. So a lot of cross industry familiarity here at Munro. So
very cool,
James. I'd like to start with let's start with what we were talking about before Grace got us started here. I'm curious of the relationship between the Hyundai Motor Group is Hyundai, Kia, and Genesis.
That's correct.
The relationship, I know Genesis is high-end, and I got to tell you, I love the styling on the Genesis products, and I think that's a lot of people do.
Yes.
But what's the positioning, a Kia to a Hyundai?
Well, I'll give you a simplified response. It goes back to my feeling is the mid '90s. The Korean or Asia was having one of their kind of economic bubble moments, and again, I'm highly simplifying here, but essentially, Kia and Hyundai were at that time like Ford and Chevy at each other's throats, and battling for domestic superiority in Korea. They weren't really much of an export company at that time. And again, there was some sort of economic trouble. The Kia company was not going to weather it well. And again, highly simplified, the story I've been told is that leadership in South Korea reached out to Hyundai and said, we'd prefer to not have thousands of people suddenly out of jobs if Kia goes down. We'd like you to pick them up. And so it'd be, again, like Ford being asked by the government to buy General Motors or vice versa.
Yeah.
And that happened. And so since then, we have a very symbiotic relationship in that we share a lot of technologies, share a lot of structural elements, back-end elements, but we're set up, especially in the U.S., incredibly separately.
Yeah.
We treat our associates at Hyundai the same way we do at Honda or Mercedes-Benz or anywhere else. Again, there's that kind of back end alignment, but on the front end, they're strictly a competitor.
The freedom to pursue the markets as you see opportunities.
That's right.
Nice. Nice. Okay. So you've been, I did a little research and saw you've been with Kia for a long time, right?
Longest, a little over 8 years, which is the longest run I've had at any point with any one entity in my career. So things are working out. It's been great.
Yeah. So you're in a good position. I wrote some questions that I thought were, I'd like to ask. So you see me reading here a little bit.
No, that's fine. That's fine.
So
bring it on. I'm ready for you.
Perfect. So Kia's corporate strategy, how do you see that related to EVs? How do you see that going forward? Because you got some great products, by the way, you need to know. We've taken apart an EV9.
I'm familiar with that, yes.
Right? Because, and I know this going back to, I spent some time at Fiat Chrysler, and whenever we took apart the Kias or the Hyundais, or a Genesis product, which wasn't on its own then. I think it was just an
It was
upscale
just
version.
kind of a Highline Hyundai.
Yeah.
Yes.
Typically, more feature per dollar, right? I can remember comparing a Genesis to a Chrysler 300, and it's like, man, how are they doing it, right? More
Yes.
features per dollar. So, sorry, I launched into it. Back to the question, how do you see Kia's strategy for the EV market?
I think the easiest way to kind of encapsulate that is going back to early 2021 when we introduced the new logo, which many people thought was I can tell you on behalf of the organization, was a scary time. Anytime you do a huge corporate rebranding like that, it brings perils. But it went very, very well for us. This one was well received. People said, good, we like it. And you could see the bump in sales, candidly, from when we went to the new logo. Maybe I'm oversharing here, but we do clinics, obviously, on vehicles.
Yeah.
And we block off the brand name. And, to put it in very simplistic terms, somebody in the clinic would say, oh, the styling's amazing, the technology's amazing, the price that you've mentioned is amazing, the size. I love everything about that car. And then they find out it was a Kia with the old logo. Nah, I don't like it.
Oh.
So we knew that was the kind of the last anchor holding us back.
Yeah.
And so, again, the new logo came out in early 2021. The way I wind that up to electrification strategies, that we also introduced around that time what we call Plan S or Plan Shift. And this was to shift not only Kia within the industry, but we wanted to be a driver of shift of the industry. And electrification is the big push on that. So again, it's been one of the things I love about working here. And I did a spell at General Motors and also was on the media side for many years. So I got to know a lot of car companies, not as deeply as I know Kia or General Motors necessarily, but I know just enough to be dangerous about everybody. And what I learned quickly at Kia is when this company decides to do something, you better hope you like the idea, because it's going to happen.
Yeah.
And at Plan S, it was announced a very aggressive rollout of all electric EVs, of hybrid technology, of plug-in hybrids, really electrifying the entire lineup, with full EVs being the real kind of hero of that effort.
Yeah.
And here we are 4 years later, 3.5 years later, and we're right on target, and we'll continue that way. There's been no hesitation. There's been no products that we knew were coming and that were suddenly not to the U.S. market. It's all full speed ahead, and I think that's something that I'm very proud of, that the organization has made that commitment to electrification, and I would say did that as a way to kind of show the boldness, but it's also, I believe, worked in many ways to say we are, assuming a leadership in the next generation of electrification. So yes, we're all in. That's the answer to your question.
And has there been any, I guess, pivot or adjustment to that when in a recent light of, it seems the market is slowed on EVs and that hybrids seem to be more in fashion, right? Is that, because you got some great EVs out there, right?
Oh, yeah.
And a commitment to that.
Selling well, yes.
And more coming.
That's
right?
correct.
EV6, I'll ask you about that later, but any pivot based on recent
I would
changes?
say the other thing I love about this organization is something's decided, you can count on it, it's going to happen. And B, we're incredibly nimble, can pivot very, very quickly, and not just pivot to something that needs to be redesigned or redone. We already have it in our portfolio. So the only thing I would say in response to your question is that we're just working to have more hybrids and plug-in hybrids in our lineup, but again, focus on electrification ultimately. Other than just clamoring for each and every hybrid and plug-in that we can get from our factories, nothing else has changed.
Yeah. And speaking of that, your factory is it West Point, Georgia?
That's correct.
Right? They're making EV9s there.
That's right.
Since last year. They're supposed to early 25, they're supposed to be making the EV6, if I remember
That's
right.
correct. You're right.
So some capability there to make plug-in hybrids if necessary, or
I mean, I would say working for this company, I would
yeah,
say yes. Now, I've not seen the spreadsheet that says we're going to be doing that, but I can tell you if that became something that was necessary or advantageous, yes. I mean, I will just preface by saying I've been to our factory in West Point because I was highly curious as a student of the industry. I was highly curious to see how we would integrate a full EV into a production line that's been running, internal combustion vehicles, award-winning, like the Telluride and the Sportage and others for 15 plus years.
yeah,
How does that whole new? I kind of pictured when I heard it was going to be going to West Point that we would like build another, side building or something like that.
yeah,
No, it's actually essentially it's the same line. EV9 goes everywhere that a Telluride or a Sportage or a Sorento goes, but there's just one little leg where it kind of the line veers off. Just as far as you can see, and that's where the battery pack and all the EV only bits and pieces are applied, and then it comes right back into the normal lineup and carries on. So to answer your question, could we integrate in plug-in hybrids or hybrids? I don't know, but
yeah,
knowing this company, I'm going to go ahead and say yes because I'm
yeah.
sure we.
If you already have that flexibility to build,
Yeah, that's the thing. Yeah, we're incredibly nimble, incredibly flexible, and very definitive in its actions. I really appreciate that.
yeah. And speaking of the plant and building product, that this is a question that Eric prompted me with here is how do you see Kia positioning itself as a leader in eco-friendly vehicle production? And with a new facility, I would expect that you have a lot of, you didn't have to deal with the legacies of older plants, that set yourself up for some nice eco-friendly production.
Yeah, I mean, again, the flexibility that we've seen out of our group in West Point is to be commended. They've done a great job. I mean, as you mentioned, now bringing in EV6 production also. So that's going to become a kind of a little sidebar that factory can do to being one of their main production or one of their main elements, which I think is great. The other part that I think that is worthy mentioning is the larger Hyundai Motor Group has built, I should say, a factory in Savannah, Georgia called the Meta Plant, and that is full EV and only EV. In fact, there's even a battery facility that's going up in the vicinity. So, and Kias will be a part of the production out of that facility in time. So, yeah, we're in a good position to meet the market's needs when it comes to electrification, for sure.
Yeah, and I have to concur with that. I have a very good friend who I knew from Fiat Chrysler days that was a leader of FCA plants, right? A general assembly leader, and he took a position, retired from FCA, and took a position with that Savannah plant, and I think that will set you up well. He'll be in a similar role, and he was very good for FCA. That was a nice pickup for you guys.
Good to hear that.
What else here? So switching gears a little bit here. So EV technology, first-time buyers, corporate communications. How do you feel like you focused on how to educate consumers on this whole range anxiety and infrastructure and all the rest of that? Have you, as from a corporate communications aspect, how to, I guess, ally that fear that it's not as much of a problem as some people think?
From a consumer perspective, we are set up internally here. I mean, that what you're kind of asking is more a marketing question and how they're presenting the vehicles and the technology within to a consumer side. But kind of circumstantially, to answer your question, we work very closely with the media. with the buff books, with all the EV outlets that have popped up and doing big numbers now. So we are making sure that the media knows. So how Kia sees range anxiety, which I believe range anxiety is probably an old word now. It's more charge anxiety. And I would like to talk to you about something that I did this week at some point that I think addresses that very, very, very well. But no, we don't. We on my side of the business, we're not really educating consumers. We're educating the media to make sure they understand how adept and ready Kia is for this transition, and that our products, in many cases, already set standards. I mean, the EV9, as an example, a 3-row, 7-passenger full electric EV. Probably the closest competitor today is the Rivian, which is substantially more money.
Right.
That vehicle, you can easily have that to give you over 300 miles of range on a charge. So, and I think that it's funny, if I can just, something that popped in my head about 6 months ago about range anxiety is that nobody talks about that when it comes to gasoline powered cars. I had a Kia Stinger as my company car before I now have an EV6, and the range on that, it was a smaller tank, twin turbo V6 with close to 400 horsepower. So I drove it reasonably aggressively, but I got about 300 miles on a tank. So to go electric and have 300 miles proves that it works.
Yeah.
And so I think the range anxiety is no longer the issue for consumers nearly as much as charge.
Yeah. And I agree with you. It's the education element, because I can recall, I won't mention the manufacturer, but having owned a couple of varieties of their vehicles and being part of the product development process, that I knew some of those had smaller gas tanks. And driving that car, I was annoyed that if I got close to 250 miles on that fill up,
yeah,
that I needed to find a gas station pretty soon.
Yeah.
And then there's other products from that company that I knew they had a bigger tank. They had a 24-gallon tank on it with an efficient motor that I could easily get close to 400. So you're right. It became a non-issue with ICE. Why such a...
Nobody buys an internal combustion car based on the size of the gas tank.
Right.
Nobody even knows what it is.
Right.
Until you start filling up and it clicks off when it clicks off. That's how you learn that.
Yeah.
Oddly, in the electric vehicle space, it became very, a big topic by the media substantially. How, what's the battery pack? What's the range? What's the size?
Yeah.
But again, you don't talk about that when it comes to gas tanks, which is an ironic thing. I think it pays to mention that the fact that you and I are sat here talking about this is just emblematic of the fact that this is a huge shift in how we're going to transport ourselves, not dissimilar from how it must have felt 120 years ago between horse-drawn carriages and gasoline.
Yeah.
In fact, with my team here, after I, as I said, Plan S back in 2021, I sat down with my team and said, we're about to go into a very historic period in this industry. We're all lucky to be doing this. This is not just introducing a new 8-speed transmission or a new matte paint job or a new 1,000-watt stereo system. This is changing the business. Again, if you were taking care of horses for carriages back 120 years ago, there must have come a point where you thought, wonder if this is going to work out.
Yeah. Yeah.
We're in that mode now again. And, it's not going to be drastic. We're not just going to see internal combustion disappear tomorrow or any rapid way, probably the way horses did. But the ideology, I should say, of that transaction or transition is highly similar.
Right. Right. Living through this point. I agree with you. Like being
we're lucky, actually.
Right. Being a student of history, that like who'd have known you're going to live through something as dramatic as what we are right now.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
agree.
I've been accused of being too bullish on it amongst my friends and family. Mr. EV. I'm like, well, hold on a minute. Fine. Yes. But that's because that's what's happening. And if I was, hiding from that, number one, I'd be doing my company a disservice. And number two, as a student of the industry, I'd be ignoring the fact. And so that's the way I approach it.
And doing my friends and family a disservice, right?
Yeah, ultimately, yeah. I mean, quite a few of them have electric vehicles or electrified Kias now. So I guess I must be doing something right.
Yeah, yeah, and I think you just go drive it, right?
Oh,
But before you get too fixed on an opinion, go drive one and then let's talk. Is usually how I approach it.
sadly, we got the EV world got politicized.
Yeah.
We don't need to get into all that, but it
Yes.
did, unfortunately. And so that's one of the other things you've got to fight your way around.
And that's where I like your point. You're focused on educating the people that are going to communicate, right? The media, they're going to communicate to that wider audience. And if they know the truth, they're more likely to communicate the truth.
Well, it's interesting. I won't say their names, but there's 4 or 5 members of the greater automotive media that are not fans of EVs. I believe that they're probably coming at it from a political perspective. That's fine. We're all allowed to do that. But I always find it interesting when I talk to them, like, "Ooh, when am I going to get to be able to drive the new EV, whatever?" Or, I saw your press release and you're selling all those EVs. That's great. And I just wanted to say, but wait a minute, you don't like EVs. And so it's a constant kind of battle with some, but the vast majority of the media, especially in the last couple of years, see that, as I just defined, this is where it's going. There's very little, if any, investment on a major scale by any car company today in new internal combustion engines. It's all refinement, squeezing the last drop of energy out of every drop of fuel. It's not like that side's been abandoned,
Right.
but follow the money, folks. It's going to electrification. So,
right. Yeah. And we as industry insiders, we see it, right? It's less obvious to the average citizen that where the auto manufacturers have focused their money. So I agree.
The average customer's in market, every 7 years, I think, on average. So they wouldn't know if they bought their last car 6 years ago. Well, lots happened. And so that's again why we work so closely with the important media to make sure that, as you said, just the facts are presented. Do with them what you will, but the truth is, this is where it's going.
So is there how about any exciting partnerships that Kia is working on in terms of charging infrastructure, right? I see if you buy a Ford, they're going to put the level 2 charger in your garage.
Right.
Infrastructure or any collaboration with any tech companies that you could hint at or share with us?
Well, I mean, maybe I could go back to the charge anxiety element and what we did just this week. There's a new company, I guess you could say, that's been founded by 8 car makers, of which Kia is a proud member of one of them, called IONNA. And this is related to, there's a charging infrastructure network in Europe called IONNA T. So this is ION, again, the reference to electric, ION North America, IONNA. And we just this week had a grand opening of a new IONNA station in near Durham, North Carolina, which is really an amazing thing. It's a little town called Apex, which is the classic little, American town with the one main street that a lot of the old brick buildings have been turned into, I don't know, bakeries and lofts and things like that, but it's only 2 blocks long. So it's a classic little mid-American town. But at the very edge of that little Main Street area, there was an old gas station, which I heard was about 100 years old, that had just been kind of fallen into disrepair. It was a bit of an ugly part of town. IONNA has purchased that property and has now pivoted it and turned it into what we're calling a Rechargery. And so these will be destinations for charging, because today, if you have a Tesla, then there's big banks of charging in many, many places. Tesla's been very, very aggressive in that space. With the non-Tesla charging outlets, they've been kind of more hit or miss, often behind parking lots or in parking lots behind Costco's and grocery stores. Not always the most wonderful places to sit for a while.
Yeah.
But IONNA, I think, is really onto something, because they're going to be developing destination charging areas that and all high speed. So if you have a Kia, our vehicles can charge up to 800 volts. So you could be back on the road with a full state of charge in 15, 20 minutes. So the idea is that you're not, again, sat behind a Costco. You're at a place that has a coffee shop in it, and clean bathrooms, and a warm place to sit if it's cold outside, and an area for the kids to play.
Yeah.
It becomes really quite a destination. What I'm envisioning, because again, we're living this very historic time, is families driving by these locations as they pop up more and more, and saying, gee, honey, we've been talking about getting an EV. If we do, we can go there, whereas a bank of charging units in the back of a Costco, not quite as appealing. So I think to answer your ultimate question, that I think is something that really is going to be powerful.
Yeah.
Home charging, obviously, fantastic. A lot of the early adopters were very early in that. I had home charging in my house in 2016 because I wanted to learn about this electrification. And that will continue to be a big source for charging. But eventually, to get that next level, you need to have people say, wow, as much as I know that there's going to be 4 gas stations when I drive to grandma's house, I now saw that there's 3 charging stations. So I have that same level of comfort. And that's what IONNA is going to do, a wonderful thing.
Yeah, that's awesome to hear about, because it's all, people either see a problem or an opportunity. And like you're describing, some old property that's been forgotten about probably could be purchased for a nice deal, and now turn it into, like you're saying, more of a destination than undeveloped.
It's the shiniest, nicest looking part of town now. I mean, I'm sure if you're a local resident of that town, of which this is going to replicate itself hundreds of times over across the U.S. in the next couple of years, these will be areas that may have been like, yeah, that does, that's a bit of a blight section of our town. That's now an appealing part. So that's good.
And there'll be a ripple effect. Others around it, right? They'll invest, right, and put that bakery next door and the deli, and yeah.
So funny you mentioned that. At the Rechargery in North Carolina that we were at this week, there was a kind of a mobile bakery that has, I guess it's like a kind of an annex or an extra space from a local bakery that's well known. I didn't know the name, obviously, but I learned that. And it's like an old repurposed container, which is now has all the baking equipment inside. And they had it there for the grand opening. And I said, oh, this will be taken away, I guess, after the event. Oh, no, that's now here. They wanted to be a part of this. So yes, your point's well taken. It will become a destination of its own, and therefore, I believe, motivation to go electric. That people know that it's available and pleasant. That's a huge trick.
All right, transitioning a little bit.
Yeah.
Corporate communication, international, right? All a corporate, Kia corporate. For you?
I mean, I am North America,
Just North America.
focused.
Okay.
Yes, but work, diligently and closely with our global communications team also. Yes. Because what happens in the U.S., for better, for worse, is powerful.
Yeah.
And so even though I don't have a global remit, I know that a lot of things we do are important on a global basis.
And I asked that because I was curious of the messaging or anything unique to some of the markets around the world, different than what we see. And I say that because I get kind of bored with, U.S. commercials. After you see it, it could be a great commercial. You see it 2, 3, 4 times, great. After that, right, you start to tune out. But just curious of some of the things they do in other markets.
Yeah, I mean, I think when it comes to electrification, there is one interesting element, and we have a vehicle coming out in a matter of months, well, about a year actually, that's going to address this very well for the U.S. market. We are a curious entity here, our consumer marketplace, in that we often buy vehicles based on what if. What if we have to go get grandma and 9 pieces of luggage from the airport? What if we decide to load the dogs and the kids and go camping at the top of that mountain place? What if we, suddenly want to drive to Vegas every weekend? You know, and that's not the smartest way to buy a car.
Right.
And I say that because in my background, I was executive vice president and market analyst for Kelley Blue Book. And so I focused a lot on wise car buying. And that's where I realized that we buy things that are not really important to us, but what if? And I just, a personal side, at one point, my wife wanted a new vehicle. She selected one that had a folding down third row of seats. And I said, why are we doing that? We have one daughter. We don't need that. Just don't. Well, again, she gave me the what if. So we went ahead and bought that. When I was cleaning it, when we're going to sell it off, then a couple years later, I went, oh yeah, this thing has these rear seats, and I opened them up, and they were exquisite. They'd never seen.
Yeah.
So they were, the leather was gorgeous on those. So I think when you talk about different markets, this market has been really focused on what if I need to take off on a trip to a mountaintop. And so a lot of the electric vehicles have been kind of connected to that, like the EV9, like Rivian, things like that. And I don't mean just off-roading, but just, that kind of big road trip spirit.
Yeah.
Lucid has done a fantastic job of that with their very expensive, but very large battery, very efficient motors and very large battery packs. Anybody could get that range, but it's expensive.
Yeah.
It's just, it works. So what I see in other markets is them looking at us like, well, don't you understand that EVs are great for just kind of scooting around town? It relieves the necessity to go get gasoline. You're driving quieter, smoother, easier. It's just the smart. I mean, and an electric vehicle is at its highest, value or efficiency in around town stuff. Highways, where it not fails, but loses some of that efficiency.
Right. The regenerative braking, and I fully agree with you, right? When I'm taking one of our vehicles around town, it always performs better. It'll say I only have 180 miles of range, and I'm going someplace that's a 60-mile round trip. I'll come back with 160 miles of range, right? Because it was stop and go all the way, and I benefited from regenerative braking.
Absolutely.
Yeah, they don't like highway mileage. That's just a straight draw on the brand.
Yeah, I mean, it's, I'm always thinking the story about when the Bugatti Veyron first came out and why it had to have so much horsepower was because, and I can't remember the exact line, but it was something like, well, if to get a car to go 170 miles per hour, you need this much power, to overcome the effects of the air and all that kind of stuff. So, you get the aerodynamics really good or just add more power. And it's a sliding scale. Like if you want to do 180, you have to add, I'm making it up, 150 horsepower. If you want to do 190, you have to add 200 horsepower. And the goals for Bugatti was, 240 miles per hour, hence whatever it is, 1400 horsepower. Because when you get in that highway situation, you're just fighting elements then that you don't when you're scooting around town. So I think long way of answering your question, other markets have looked at EVs, I would say smarter than we have to this point, but as commuter type vehicles, that's about to change. And Kia is pretty excited to be leading that with vehicles like the EV3 that we'll have later this year.
How about, here's one that resonated with me is corporate communication again. How do you see that evolving in the digital media space? Right? How do you reach customers in the next even 2 years, and a long horizon would be 5 years in digital media? That how your Kia's using digital media to reach their customers? How you see that evolving?
Yeah, that's a great question. A very simplistic answer, I think, is something happened with a good friend of mine who had told me that he was in the market for a full EV. I told him based on his lifestyle, he was the right guy for an EV. He was kind of taking baby steps. He had a plug-in hybrid. And then he said, yeah, I'm ready for a full EV. And he said he's put some money down on a Model 3. And I said, good. I have no problems, compunction with that. I'm just glad you're going EV. And that's the most important part. But can I bring home an EV6 just so you can tell me if it's good, bad, or indifferent? Because this is a guy who was ready for a Model 3. And again, no judgment. I'm just glad he's going EV.
Yeah.
So I brought home an EV6. It was very early build. This was a couple of years ago, so it was a bit rough. The materials weren't perfect and all that kind of thing yet. And took him out for a ride in it. And jump ahead, he now has an EV6. He does not have a Tesla. I had nothing to do with it. He just said, no, this is more what I'm looking for. And he liked the idea of having dealers available in case there was service and all that. So that's all good. But here's to answer your question about how to communicate. He wanted a blue one. I made arrangements with his local dealer to make sure they got one of the first blue ones. Everything's good. And then he said, when is Alex going to review this car? And I said, oh, do you mean Alex Dykes, who has a very popular YouTube channel where he reviews vehicles, and he's got wires in his brains that I wish I had, where you can tell him one chunk of technical information, he never forgets it. And he's very good at then repurposing that into important stuff for his viewers. Long way of saying, my friend who was all in for an EV6 said, I need to know what Alex says. Now, I'm friends with Alex. In fact, I saw him like 2 weeks later at the Chicago Auto Show and took a picture with him and sent it to my friend, said, there, see, I know what you're doing here.
Yeah.
Alex luckily had a very good review of the EV6. And so long way of saying, I think when it comes to digital marketing, we at Kia, we like to be very present in lots of different venues. I mean, you'll see us big time at next week's NBA All-Star game and NBA, year round. We do a lot of things with entertainment, with the Emmys. We do lots of things, we're very deeply involved in the Electrify Expo, which is kind of a road show of electric vehicles that goes around the country. Again, the premise of putting people in the seat and letting them experience it is such a huge point. So we like to keep lots of different activities out there, but on the digital side, we think that personality matters a lot. And so we want to make sure that those that are creating content are aware of us and hopefully say something good. We can't, lead that. But in many cases, especially with our award-winning electric vehicles, they are saying good things. And so we keep very present in that space.
Yeah. And you mentioned that's the first place I saw an EV9 in person was at Electrify Expo in Long Beach last year. Yeah.
Yes, I was there too.
Yeah. So, all right. I mean, is there anything else that you wanted to share with us that comes to mind? We covered a bit of ground here today, but
yeah, we did. This has been fun.
Give you the opportunity.
No, I appreciate that. I guess to leave behind is that, as we said early on here, the Kia organization is all in. And when I say all in, that doesn't mean we're forcing people to go electric, but we have, an award-winning line of electric vehicles. What we really want to be is known as a company that's ready for anything. We're still committed to internal combustion. Have our K4 sedan just recently went on sale, and it's killing. It's a really beautiful design. Beautiful from a design perspective. Very aggressive. Just gasoline power at this time, but I think it just shows that we are not backing down from that space. We want to be seen as a very early consideration in any market you might be looking at. And that's not an uncommon thing for a car company to say, but I think that this one backs it up with really tremendous machines and machines that people can be proud to own. We learned that so often. For many years, Kia was, I like to call a used car alternative. Looks like my current car is starting to struggle. I don't want to put money into another transmission. Let me look at my wallet. I can't afford that new car I wanted. I don't want a used car. I'll get a Kia. That's what this company was for the first 20 years of its existence in the US market. It's not anymore. We are, much more in demand and finding ourselves. I mean, just go to a Kia store and look what's available in the used car area. BMWs, Mercedes, Audis, Lexus. I mean, vehicles being cross-shopped by owners that would never have step foot in a Kia dealership are now ready to go.
Yeah.
So it's a different day.
It's great styling, and you built a reputation of reliability, right?
That's right.
And now, like you said, high end, even Kia store or Genesis, right? Trade in that BMW, and they have a lot. That's my recollection. Is long, like I said, back to my FCA days, that you get a lot for your dollar. Typically higher content and a much easier price point. So.
But not just from I totally agree with you, but that's not all, and for a long time, that was what you got. Oh, you bought a Kia. Oh, you got a good deal on it. Oh, that's good. But now I'll paraphrase Peter Schreier, who Hall of Fame designer, who joined Kia probably about 15 years ago and was instrumental in the way Kias look today. And I won't try to imitate him with a very bad German accent, but he said to me one time, James, when you make a car, you have to bend the sheet metal, so you should bend it good. And I know it's such a
simple,
obviously, it's a simple thing to say, but isn't always practiced. And Kia is practicing it, and that's why I think that we are seen in new driveways around the country.
Yeah, I agree, and it's fun to watch. So, hey,
it is. Yes, I feel very fortunate.
Yes. So, James, I want to thank you again for joining us on our Munro Live podcast. And to all our viewers, thanks for joining. And I hope you enjoy this conversation we had with James. I certainly did. I see Grace has been entertained over on the side here. So
if Grace is happy, I'm done. My job's done.
And that's usually how we roll.
That sounds wise.
So that's fun. Hey, James, thank you again. And continued best of luck and enjoy the success.
And enjoy the Super Bowl.
We're big fans. Yes, we'll enjoy the squares.
Get those squares in. Yes, I want to know that you won a new EV9.
Me too. All right. Thanks
good.
Again. We'll see you.
My pleasure. Thank you.